Welcome to Quilting with Lori. My name is Lori Dickman. Today we are going to be using scraps and crumbs. My goal is to get a lot of this crumb scrap stash used up to make a fun quilt, and you get to watch as I do this. Do you all have totes filled with scraps such as this? I have a lot of this, and so I've decided this winter, over the winter months, I am going to be using up a lot of these leftover scraps or crumbs to make fabric in which I will make some beautiful quilts. So today I'm getting started on one, and I just want to share with you some of the parts and pieces that I'm making. I'm actually creating fabric from the crumbs, or the little scrap pieces that are left over from previous projects. I also will be using my new Janome Horizon machine that I have just purchased. It will not fit down in my quilting studio because it is too large, but I will be using this as I'm scrapping up this stash of crumbs. And please forgive Bailey's snoring each time I go to create a video clip. She lays down and starts snoring, so I apologize if you are hearing that in the background. So I've brought you over here to the living room floor where I have some of the parts and pieces all laid out here for you. I'll show you what I've been doing. I did find this piece of fabric. I'm going to use it as a background fabric. It's a narrow piece. I think it's about 22 inches wide, and it was about 5 yards long. So I pieced some together to make this center medallion section. I'm also going to be piecing some together, or the leftover pieces, to make the 12.5-inch squares for some of my blocks. And I'm going to have them on the outside edges. I am creating fabric from which I am cutting out all of these orange peels, the center circle, as well as these hexies. And what I am doing with each of these, and I'll take you step by step through all of this, but I'm just giving you an overview here. I am using some very lightweight Pellon interfacing. This is fusible. You wouldn't have to use fusible. As I put it on here, I've traced the orange leaf shape on the Pellon, as well as, of course, when I cut out the piece itself. But I'm going to actually stitch all the way around that, and then I'm going to cut the Pellon a little bit and flip it right side out, just like I've done on all of these. And then I've pressed it, and that will make a nice piece for applique, and I will be appliquing. And I'm going to use my new Janome and have some fun with the applique stitches that are available on that. So I'm making a medallion type quilt, or wall quilt. I'm going to have the center be these beautiful orange peel sections with a center circle. I used a cottage cheese lid to get my circle. I've got some hexies here. I'll show you those templates in just a moment. But I started by simply making fabric, and here is one of them. As you can see, I just started putting together a lot of the crumbs. Some of the crumbs started out really small, and then I started adding on any kind of strips that I had left over that would make it big enough to be able to actually cut out some large sections. This is more of the smaller bottom portion that I'm going to be using around the bottom here, but those three up there are larger orange peels. And so let me show you how I've made the fabric, how I cut them all out, and I'll show you the templates that I used to cut all of this. So here are the 3 templates that I have used. This is a half hexie, and when I cut out my fabric as well as my Pellon interfacing, I had it on the fold at this point here, and that's how I cut everything, and I'll show you that. I'll demonstrate that to create the hexie fabric as well as the lining, the fusible lining. And it doesn't have to be fusible, remember, it can just be a lightweight woven interfacing as well. And then here is the smaller, this is actually, I guess, would be the medium orange peel. That's the large orange peel, and then there is actually an even smaller one. All of these are Missouri Star templates. I do use a lot of Missouri Star. I do have my own templates as well. You can find a lot of this out on my website, quiltingwithlori.com, and go to my store. But I wanted to go ahead and use these. I could have just made it simple and just made squares of this crumbs and the scrap stash, But no, of course I had to make it a little bit more interesting. So I decided to make a medallion type wall quilt, and I've made fabric and cut out all of these templates. And I really don't know what I'm going to end up with. I do think that even my outer border is going to be a curved border, and we'll get to that here in a little bit. Now let's see how I am actually cutting the pellon, cutting the fabric, and getting it sewn together. So that you know what I'm using, these are rolls of Pellon PLF 36. It's a fusible interfacing. It's a lightweight. I think I bought a bunch of these back in 2020 during the pandemic. I was doing a lot of applique, and I do like to use this when I'm doing applique. So I will try and link, I believe I got these off of Amazon at that time. But it's 15 inches wide by 3 yards, so there's quite a bit in each of these rolls. So that's what I'm using, just because I had it on hand. And now I'm going to show you how I traced off each of these templates. So this is the small orange peel, and I'm basically just taking a marker and tracing around that orange peel. And then you could either use a scissors or a rotary cutter to cut it, and then it will fit nicely on your fabric that you've created. And what I am doing is making sure that the adhesive side is facing up. It's facing my machine. That way when I open this and cut it, slit it so I can turn it, then the adhesive side will actually secure the back. I don't really want this adhesive to secure onto the background of my fabric, or you could do that if you choose to, but I just wanted to make sure that my piece itself was nice and secure. There's a ton of different bias in here, and having that fuse to fuse this together really does give that piece some stability. So that's why I chose to have my fusible up, as I'm gonna go ahead and stitch this all the way around. So let me get this set up so I can show you that. Actually, first I think I'm gonna show you how I cut the hexies with this pellon. I'll do that first. So I've laid the pellon here, and I have it on the fold. So it is folded right here. And this is a half hexie template. The neat thing about using a half hexie template for normal quilting is that you can piece your hexies in straight rows, and these are all straight seams, and you'll have your seam allowance here to attach the rows together to create the complete hexie. But in the case of this project, I am going to cut a hexie that's a complete hexie. Therefore, I don't want this 1/4 inch seam allowance down here, so I'm lining up the fold of the pellon on this line right there, and I'm going to trace with a pen or a pencil, or just even cut around with a rotary cutter. And then I will have one complete hexie. It will have its seam allowances out here, but we don't want a seam allowance there. We're going to do the same thing, or the same process, when we cut out fabric to applique. So from the crumb fabric that I'm going to be creating, I'm going to again fold the fabric in half. On the fold, I will line up this line in here, because I do not want a 1/4 inch seam allowance right there. And I'll cut the fabric the very same way. So I have my hexie laid out here, and I am going to go ahead and get it cut out. Oops, I kind of moved things there. Trying to cut this around the camera. I've cut out one of the hexies. Again, it was cut on the fold, and I eliminated this bottom seam allowance. We don't need that. So that is ready for a hexie. Now, to cut it out of the fabric, I would follow the same process. This leftover piece of fabric that I've created from crumbs is just not wide enough either direction for me to cut this. So I'm going to need to add some more scraps to this, some more crumbs, to make it big enough to be able to cut another hexie from this. So Bailey's snoring has gotten quite loud, so I put her outside for a few minutes. Hopefully she'll not start barking, but she can enjoy the sun out on the deck. So I want to start showing you how I am actually going to sew the pellon to one of the orange peels. I am simply going to sew 1/4 of an inch all the way around the entire pellon. It is going to be completely stitched. And I'm using my new Genome here. I'm using a quilting stitch on straight stitch on the machine. And the neat thing is when you stop with this machine, you'll notice that the presser foot raises up just a little bit so that as you're doing chain piecing, you can add another piece in there. And then when I press the foot, it lowers and just continues stitching. I love that about this machine. And I just want it to go one more stitch. There we go. And notice how it raised so I can pivot. Let's remove, we are almost back at the beginning here. There we go. All right. Now what I'm going to do here is cut a slit in this right here. I'm going to simply pull it apart so the pellon is loose. Cut a slit in there. In fact, I'm going to take my scissors and I'm going to cut a nice long slit in there. And that way I can turn. I'm going to go down into the corner here and make sure that it's turned nicely. Go down into that corner. And you can trim away the corners if you choose. I just didn't do that for this one. And then I will just keep rolling these edges until everything is under, and then I'm going to take it to the iron and press it so that everything is, all of the pellon is pressed underneath. And then this is not the sticky side, this is the nice woven side here. And so I can press that and have a beautiful piece to be appliqued. So now I want to share with you how to do the crumb piecing and making, it's basically making fabric with any kind of scraps that you have. And as I mentioned, I need to make this one a wider piece so that I can cut out some elements, either the orange peels or the hexagons. And I think what I need right now are actually hexagons. So that's what I will focus on. I'm going to go ahead and add fabric to that. I'll show you how that's done. I'm also going to start from scratch and make a new piece. Excuse me. And I'll make a new piece and I'll show you how I actually crumb quilt from this mess of stuff here. So let's have fun. Let's get started. So I went to the ironing station and I pressed the seam allowances here, and now I'm just going to get rid of some of this excess wonky stuff. Let me grab my ruler. All right. Get rid of that. Let's make a straight line right there. Some of this, when you're trimming away things, you can keep and reuse, and some of it is so small that that you can't reuse it, so that will be trash, or I can use that in pet pillow stuffing. So let's see what I can do here. I'm just simply trying to make a couple of straight edges, which will allow me to attach it here. And I think what I'm going to do on this piece, here's what I think I'm going to do. Every piece you work with is going to end up being different, completely different. You're simply trying to use up as much fabric as you can. So what I could do there is maybe sew that together and make a bigger piece. So that could start working this way, but then I'll need to continue adding fabric from my stash. So let me grab some more pieces and keep working at this. Here's what I plan to do. I've found this section. I'm going to add that there. I will straighten that up and add that there. I have these 4 little pieces. I'm going to make sort of a rectangle from that. So I'm going to sew those together and create sort of a rectangle. This should be able to either attach here or to the other end. And then I'll just continue pulling pieces, adding them together and sewing them. So on this one, you could certainly go ahead and use your ruler and straighten it up first so that you have a straight edge from which to work. So there we go, and I could start sewing that. Or you don't have to, you could eyeball it, sew it, and then trim it up afterwards so you don't have all that excess seam allowance or all excess fabric in your seam allowance. This piece I've sewn, so it's a nice longer piece here, so that's getting ready there where I can actually maybe start attaching it here in a few minutes. Now I want to show you how I'm going to piece these sections together. And I'm just going to eyeball these, and I'm not going to square up edges. I'm just going to eyeball them and put them together and then get rid of any excess fabric and seam allowances afterward. But let's start here. Let's see here. How about we put that like that. And I'm going straight. I'm trying to create a straight seam. There we go. So there's a little bit of excess there that I can use my ruler and get rid of. All right, so I've done that. Now let's go with this one right here. And I'm going to add this together. And again, I'm trying to create a straight seam. So that's how I'm going to sew that together. Started on a point, so I had to move that along a little bit. All right, so that one was sewn. I will need to remove some of this excess fabric there. Press that open. So I'm getting there. It's beginning to look more like a rectangle. Now I'm going to add this piece there. And here we go. It is a fabulous way to get rid of fabric that you have in your stash. Now this one, I should have used a a leader because I'm at a point, and starting something at a point is just not, doesn't work so well. Let's see if I can get this to work. It did. I got it. Okay, so here's what I have. It's turning into sort of a rectangle there, and when I straighten it up, and I'll be able to add it to this. Maybe what I could do here is add it along there. I think I still need some more pieces, so let me grab some more pieces and we'll continue working with this. I found some more oddball pieces. These are crumbs in my stash. So I'm just going to add some length to this. So here we go. Again, you're trying to sew in straight seams. So you have to create those as you're working because often you're dealing with curves and all kinds of bias. So there, I've got that. I can trim away some of this excess here, and I'll do that in a minute. I did trim away the excess from the other strip pieces when I went to the ironing board. And let's see, what can I do here? Let's add this here, which means that a lot of that will end up being excess. So I'm going to sew that. Let's see what happens here. Here we go. My goal here was to make a piece of fabric that was long enough to extend this piece so that we could sew this whole piece to the side of that other fabric so that I can cut out some hexies. And I think that's going to accomplish what I need to accomplish. So I'm going to take this to the iron, I'm going to press it, I'm going to get rid of excess pieces of fabric that I don't need. I'm going to square up the seam allowances. I'm going to use you can use what I like is those add a seam rulers. They're wonderful little rulers to make sure that you have 1/4 inch seam allowances and you're getting rid of all the excess. It's something that you use quite often in paper piecing. And those are great little rulers to have. Or you can just use a regular ruler and follow the 1/4 inch seam allowance to trim away that excess. But I'm going to go ahead and square up this side, square up this side, square this up, add it to that piece of fabric, and then I'm ultimately going to be adding it to this larger piece down here on the table, so I have a big enough piece from which to cut some hexies. I'm now doing some squaring up of these odd pieces, and you'll notice I am not worried about what fabrics are touching what fabric. It really doesn't matter, especially since they're crumbs, and especially since we're going to be cutting out sections of this for the hexies, and in some cases I'll be cutting some more orange peels, and so I'm not worried about what's next to what. It can be as scrappy and crazy as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and put a straight line there, and on this side let's do this right here. Okay, so now that's something I can add somewhere to this piece. And maybe I need to add a little bit more length here. Let me see here. Actually, what I'm going to do, I'm going to make another section. In fact, I think I have another section. This was made using adding machine tape, but I could certainly put that in there, and then if I put this piece together, then I will definitely have a section that's long enough to add to this piece to be able to cut out my hexies. So I think I'll do that. So I now have two pieces that I can pretty much sew together, and it should be wide enough that I'll be able to cut out one hexie for sure. And then I'll just keep taking the leftover pieces and continue adding crumbs to it to continue making more fabric from which I can cut additional hexies. Because I do want a hexie in a 12.5 inch block. They'll be applique to a block that will encircle the entire medallion. So I'm going to need probably, at least 16 hexies. So I didn't hit the record button properly, and some of that was missed. So I just wanted to repeat what I just shared here. What I did within this piece of fabric is I put it on the fold, as you can see here, and I cut out a hexie. But I made sure that the fold is on that inside line there. I don't need to include this outer 1/4 of an inch because this hexie is on the fold. If I was cutting this hexie from just one side, I would then need to include the 1/4 inch seam allowance so that I could sew it to the opposing side, so it would be a complete hexie. But I don't have to worry about that. So I'm eliminating the 1/4 inch seam allowance here, making sure that line is on the fold, and I'm cutting around the outside edge, and there's my hexie. And then it will go with the pellon, and I will lay the pellon on here, the right sides together, so the fusible side is facing me, and I will stitch all the way around this just like I did the other one, and we will end up with, and then I'll turn it just like I did with the orange peel, and we'll end up with a great piece that we can applique. I'm going to continue to create pieces of fabric from which I can cut out some hexies. And what I'm going to do with this leftover piece is square up an edge. This is all kind of wonky. As you can see, the hexie was cut out of the middle of it there. So I'm simply going to get rid of some of this wild and wonky stuff. And maybe I'll just continue up the side there. Whoops. And now I will continue adding pieces, or maybe I'll actually work this way and create more of a rectangle. And I'll just keep putting pieces together and grabbing stuff from my scrap stash. There's just all kinds of stuff in here that I can start adding and making some fabric. And as you saw in earlier videos of mine, you can start out very, very small with tiny little pieces and just start working from that and just keep on going to create fabric. So even if your crumbs are very, very small, you can certainly use them. Put this right side together, make a seam allowance there, and you've begun a crumb piece right there. And then you can just keep adding all the way around it to create squares and rectangles. And you can either use squares and rectangles in a quilt, or you can subcut all of the fabric into template elements, whether it's an orange peel, a hexie, a star, a triangle, whatever you choose to make. So here's another piece of fabric that I've created from my crumbs, and I just kept adding to it until I got a big enough piece of fabric from which I can actually cut another hexie. So again, here's the half hexie template. I'm going to fold this fabric on the on the fold here at some point. Let's see what we should do here. I got to fold it a little bit farther there. And again, I am going to place this right on that inside line there because I do not need this 1/4 inch seam allowance here. And I am going to take my rotary cutter and cut around there, and I'll have a full hexie. Let me cut that. I'll bring it right back to the tabletop. So I've cut a hexie from this piece of fabric that I had just made. And now I'm going to take the pellon that I had cut earlier. And this is the fusible side, the adhesive side. It's facing me. And I am going to just pin it on there with some big pins. I'm going to take it to the machine and I am going to stitch all the way around here, 1/4 inch all the way around the entire outside edge. I'm going to separate the two, put a slice in the pellon there, and then I'll turn it just like I did the orange peel so that I will have a hexie that's ready to be appliqued. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll bring this back. I've just cut some background squares. They're 12.5 inches. I have gone ahead and faced my applique hexie piece. As you can see, I had slid it there, and then I pressed it so that the pellon interfacing is not visible on the front. It's all on the back, but it makes a nice sturdy piece. I have pressed this on the fold, and the reason I did that, I've also pressed the background square vertically and horizontally. That way I can match up those two lines and these points so that my block is centered to do my applique. And next I'm going to find a fun applique design on my machine, and I'll show you the applique technique. I've decided, this was the Aurifil thread that I had on for piecing. I'm going to keep that in my bobbin, but I'm going to use I've gone through and done a simple applique. It's a blanket stitch all the way around, and I had my blanket stitch a little bit farther apart than typical. This hexie piece actually is rather thick because of some of the seams. As a matter of fact, right there's a lot of seams in there because of this tiny fabric. There's a pink fabric there and an orange and a blue. There's lots of different seams there. So that makes the hexie applique piece thick. I had to also make sure that I adjusted the foot pressure on my piece so that I wouldn't get hung up on those thick pieces. So I did that, and I just extended the length of that blanket stitch. And so it is stitched on here, and I'm going to go ahead and probably do that same stitch for all of my hexies. Over the course of the next week or so, I will be making all 16 of my Hexie pieces of fabric from my crumbs. And I will also get the orange peels applique to the center. I think I'll probably do a video for you of those appliques of the orange peel in the center medallion. I'll probably have that one ready for you to go next. And then I'm going to be working on crumb quilting the outside of my wall quilt. It's going to be a wall quilt, but I'm going to do something special. I'm going to have some curved edges on my outside sections or my outside border, and that's going to involve some additional crumb pieces. So I really want to use up a lot of my scrap stash and my crumbs. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me today as I'm taking you on this journey of putting together a crumb quilt using my stash. So here's what I plan on working on the next time that you join me. I'll have these orange peel flowers, petals actually, appliqued to the background of that center medallion. And then I'm going to be working on these Hexies. You'll see more of those next time. I'll do the applique on this one for you, and I'm also going to show you how I'm going to put these Hexie blocks around it. I do want to create, I think I'm going to use some sashing in between the two blocks as well. I'm going to put together some sashing all the way around that center medallion using adding machine tape and my crumbs. So I'm going to use crumbs for a lot of this. So you're going to see a lot of different ways to use your crumbs as I go through this process. It's going to take me a couple of weeks to accomplish that. But stop back, please, with each of the videos that I put together and enjoy and have fun and learn how you can actually use up your scraps, your crumbs, and make something beautiful. Please don't forget to like and subscribe and share this video with your friends. If there are friends that you have who have lots of scraps and lots of crumbs in their stash, I'd love to be able to show them how they can make something beautiful with that stash as well. And go ahead and hit the notifications bell as well. That will let you know every time I do post a new video. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, my name is Lori Dickman. This is Quilting with Lori. Happy quilting.